Again, good afternoon, class. So today is March 11, of course, no, March 11, 2021, another Thursday class for Research in IS proposal. And this afternoon, we are very grateful to have Mrs. Stephanie Trangia, if I'm not mistaken, Ma'am Steph, did I pronounce that right, Trangia? To speak about measurement, scales, and selecting a sample, which will be important for students who are planning to do quantitative research now, particularly on the research topics that would want to do surveys, I guess. So remember, class, that in our in our course or in our field of study in international relations, or in particular with regards to the research topics that you have decided to investigate now for the year. Some of the topics are, of course, on, for example, on looking at the effects of migration or of OFWs on their families, on the families that they leave behind in the Philippines, and also I'm not sure if Hannah, Stephanie, and Thea's group is still going to work on the South China Sea, but that is also another research topic, of course, no. But I think there are developments already with your group topics, right, Steph, Hannah, and Thea. But I have yet to look at the developments submissions. In any case, the point here, class, is that in relation to quantitative research, the development of measurement scales is quite important in the sense that we do want to measure the information that we want to determine. So aside from OFW migration as well as the South China Sea, I think we also have pop culture diplomacy, of course, and then applying the theories of international relations on online gaming, on online games, I think, and then poverty during COVID-19. That is also another research topic. And lastly, the COVID-19 vaccine. So I guess in terms of quantitative research, the OFW group thinks sa ako lang panglantaw class no sa mga topics so far, the OFW group might have to apply a quantitative research design. No? So maybe the aspect of measuring the data would come in the form of I guess from the initial submissions that I have received in the prelims, I saw that there could be a need to survey OFW children on what are the effects of the absence of their parents, not because their parents are working abroad. So if the researchers, or if you guys, you are the researchers, if you will decide to survey OFW children, or not, dili ka mo no katong grupo nga nag-work on antong topic, which were Elaine, example raman po ni Elaine, MJ, and Jamaica. That's just for a working example, class. No, if the group will decide to do a survey, it's useful for us to know how to measure. Let's say, for example, if we have a study population, or say how many, what type of people are you going to survey, right? So, and then, or is it going to be from a specific demographic, from a specific age group? And in that sense, knowing that, how are you going to look for these respondents? And although it sounds a little too specific, but being meticulous in looking for this information will really help in making your study valid, class. No? And in that sense, that is where selecting a sample comes in. Like, who will you survey if ever you want to do a survey in order to determine the effects of a certain phenomenon on a certain sample population. And then I think this topic has also been discussed in your class in math in the modern world. Nakatake na ba mo na nga klase, everybody, sa college? math in the modern world.
Yes.
Oo. I think na-discuss naman sad ni ang sample selection. And then maybe naka-research na pod mo sa ana nga subject, no? Pero kani siya kay in the context of IS research or sa inyo naging thesis mismo, no? Kani siya nga lecture kay this is the purpose of this lecture for you to apply the mathematical principles to your thesis. And in that sense, I will now give the floor to Mrs. Stephanie Trangia. So, Ma'am Stephanie has a master's in statistics from MSU-IIT, if I'm not mistaken, Ma'am Steph. And Ma'am Steph is also a full-time faculty here in Liceo de Cagayan in the math department. So, without further ado, let's welcome Ma'am Steph class. Thanks, Ma'am.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Hello. Okay, so this is actually my second invitation to discuss again to research students. My first group was actually last month. It's a biology group siya. So my second invitation kay for IS group na po. The first time yun ako actually maka-discuss sa mga research, first na ako kay sa research teacher face-to-face is actually sa mga pharmacy. Yes, so last month I was requested to discuss again advanced statistics for biology students, my research group. Sila. So this is my second time this semester. Okay, so good afternoon again, everyone. So actually, let's just finish what we can finish this afternoon, and if Ma'am Pauline will again request for my presence, let's just see, okay? Kung ganahan pa siya sa kuha mo discuss. Ganahan pa ba ka? Mabalik. Okay, kung basta taas-taasan ni siya. Anyway, medyo taas yung coverage yun actually. So, tanaw na natin sa mga na to karon, okay? So, good afternoon again. So, this afternoon is on lesson 7, type of measurement and selecting a sample. Okay. So first, let's discuss a little difference between qualitative versus quantitative research. So qualitative research mostly uses descriptive statements to seek answers to the research questions. So whereas quantitative research, these answers are usually sought on one of the measurement scales. So the difference between qualitative kay usually ang verbatim ba na siya term na ma'am? Nga usually ang ginagamit yun is paragraph form. Usually kay in-depth usually gagamit og FGD, focus group discussions, mo gyud na siya basta qualitative research. Kay usahay ang mga ang in-depth yun unsay ka kahitabo example for other social sciences nga gusto mo investigate about a certain tribal group. So, dili man pwede nga ilahalang to ansiran o questionnaire, no? Using any of the katong measurement scales, dili man pwede. So, usually, ang ginabuhat, magamit sila mga recorders, then sila na dayon ang mag-interpret ato ng mga butang. So, yung kagrabe ang qualitative research. Whereas sa quantitative research, usually fixed ang mga ginagamit answers. So, for example, in a nominal scale, so may example sa mga sa nominal scale, later ako man na siya ma-discuss po. Nominal scale, ang gender is a nominal scale. So fix kayo, what is your gender, or what is your blood type, or what is your rank in your office. So very fixed ang usually answer sa quantitative research. Why? Because ang mga ginagamit po nila mga presentations ay actually very fixed. Usahay. They use bar graphs, they use pie charts, they use the mean, median, and mode, they use hypothesis testing for a higher level na dayon na siya ng mga inferences on the population. So muna siya, those are actually a small picture between a qualitative versus a quantitative type of research. So as I had discussed earlier, there are actually 4 levels of measurement. Okay, so we have the lowest as the nominal, then followed by ordinal, interval, as well as ratio. So let's start with nominal. So this enables the classification of individuals, objects, or responses based on a common or shared property or characteristics. So a variable measured on a nominal scale may have one, two, or more subcategories depending upon the extent of variation. So for example, we have water and taxi have only one subgroup, whereas the variable gender can be classified into two subcategories such as male and female. Okay, so that is a nominal. So a nominal class actually is a qualitative type of data. So um, lahi ang qualitative research ha, kaysa sa qualitative data. Okay? So let's move sa gamay. From a qualitative versus a quantitative research, let's now move to a qualitative versus a quantitative type of data. Now, a qualitative type of data, under another actually two categories. So we have the nominal and the ordinal. So under sa nominal, a nominal type of data is a qualitative data that is more on categories, but it doesn't involve that it is only for classification purposes, for identity. Say for example, male is different from female. That's your own identity, but you cannot put them in sequence. No, it's a qualitative type of data. So for example, you have the blood typing, the nationality, what else, right? Imong religion. Those are actually qualitative type of a nominal type of data, qualitative type, but under just a nominal level. Now let's proceed sa ordinal. Ordinal scale has all the properties of a nominal scale. So categorizing individuals, check, objects, responses, or a property into subgroups on the basis of a common characteristics, but also ranks the subgroups in a certain order. So for example, income can be measured either quantitatively. So ang income can be measured in quantitatively, di ba? So how much income do you earn per month? So that's it. That is actually very, very specific. So that is quantitative. But kung magbutang-butang na ganitang range sa income, such as, unsa man, what are the examples here? Such as above average, average, and below average, muna na siya, in that case, mahimo na siyang ordinal level. So, kanina case, kaning above average, average, and below average are actually, kung tanawin ninyo siya, it is actually what? Qualitative. But this time, you can actually put them in sequence. So, it is very much different to nominal. Nga naman, in a nominal level, you can categorize a male from a female respondent, but you cannot put them in sequence. Wala siya specific sequence. When you say sequence, kanang parihan niya ba nga sequence? Dili ang alphabetical ha, lahi ng alphabetical sequence. So parihan niya. Another very, very important ninyong ginagamit actually for social sciences actually is ang Likert scale. That is actually an ordinal data, an ordinal level. Nga naman, strongly disagree, disagree, agree, sa pa na, strongly agree. Ang uban kay 5 level pa na. Strongly disagree, disagree, neutral, agree, strongly agree. So nga na, you know, na siya categories, but you can actually put them in sequence. So i-compare mo siya sa blood type or sa nationality. They have their own categories, but they don't have specific ranks. So can you now observe the differences between an ordinal from a nominal level? Nominal comes from the word names. Ordinal from the word order. Okay? So ano lang, simple lang good nga recall. Next, agto ta sa interval. Actually, if I'm going to take a look at the interval scale, muna siya og special case of a ratio level. Okay? Because there are only two variables that belong to an interval scale, which will ako na siya i-discuss karon. So, as all the characteristics of an ordinal scale, that is, individuals or responses belonging to a subcategory have a common characteristic, and the subcategories are arranged in an ascending or descending order. So, it has no absolute zero. When you say absolute zero, sa mga implication, ana, di ba kung may nguntag, how many apples do we have inside the class? So, kung wala apple, that's absolute zero. Muning wala gyud ka-exist. Pero sa ang interval scale man gud, kani siya nga level na amang gyud ka-exist even at zero. So lahi gyud siya, wala siya special case gyud siya sa isa ka ratio scale, ratio nga measurement scale. So has additivity but no multiplicativity. Okay, so ano na siya? There are actually two variables under an interval scale. Haragin din sila because the interval scale and the ratio scale or the next level of measurement scale actually belongs to quantitative data. So these two, kaning special case, ang under po sa interval scale, duhara po din sila actually ka variables. The first one is actually your temperature. Ano naman temperature, ma'am? Because temperature doesn't have an absolute zero. Remember, at 0 degrees Celsius, di ba? Dili man pwede nga, kasi temperature na there. What is the temperature of this room? Absolute zero, ma'am. Dili ba na na?
Yes,
Why? Because at 0 degrees Celsius, there exists a temperature. Nakuha nyo ang point? Lahi magod, ang ratio magod na siya absolute zero. So, dili niya pwede i-cover ang interval scale. Nga naman, because ang interval scale, special case na siya. At 0, na ay ga-exist. Pero sa ratio scale, at 0, wala ga-exist. 0 apples, wala ga-exist ng apple. 0 passers, wala ga-exist nga ng kapasar or wala ga-exist nga ng labay. Wala na ba? Wala. So, another one is your IQ. IQ actually belongs to an interval scale because a person with a 0 IQ doesn't imply that a person has absolutely no IQ. Nakuha niyo ang point? So, lahi siya. Lahi siya sa ratio. Kung nabilong pala ang IQ sa ratio, unsaon na lang. Nakuha mo sa kong point? So, there is no such thing as an absolute zero for IQ. Maybe, pag-take lang niyo mo exam, na-zero lang ka sa IQ, posible, but it doesn't imply that you have an absolute zero IQ. Na-zero lang ka sa IQ. Anak lang siya. So, what is additivity? When you say additivity, nga nila siya. Additivity differs from multiplicativity. Additivity means that 20 degrees Celsius plus 20 degrees Celsius equals 40 degrees Celsius. That is additivity. But when we say multiplicativity, we cannot say that in an interval scale. Why? You cannot say that a 40 degrees Celsius is twice as hot as a 20 degrees Celsius. That's wrong. Why? Because there is no multiplicativity property under the interval scale. Okay, hala, grabe mo na ito graduate school. Grabe mo discuss. Naulo ko, Ma'am Colleen.
Dili man good ma'am kay dili man imo maingon nga 20 times 20 equals 40. So yan na, di ba?
20 times 2. 20 times
20 times 2. So, okay, sige, go, ma'am. Has additivity but no multiplicativity. Sige, ma'am.
Oh, okay na siya. Actually, pwede siya 20 plus 20 equals 40 degrees. That's okay. But when you say twice as, kana na ganyan, mag-start na kag anang
twice as hot as 20.
Dili na siya pwede. Wala na siya wala na siya multiplicativity.
Dili na siya interval. Okay, ma'am.
Under na siya sa dili na siya sa interval. Dili po kakaingon nga ang a person with an IQ of 80 is twice as intelligent as a person with 40 IQ. So you cannot do that in an interval scale. Okay? Muna wala siya multiplicativity. But you can say 40 IQ plus 40 IQ equals 80 IQ. That's okay because that's additivity. But when you say, Ma'am Colleen is twice as dili na siya pwede.
Dili mo maingon. Logically speaking, dili siya logical kay, di ba ma'am?
Yes.
Dili man nimo ma-multiply ang IQ sa tao.
Yes. Wala siya multiplicativity.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. So lastly, ratio has all the properties of nominal, ordinal, and interval scales, and it also has a starting point fixed at 0. So therefore, it is an absolute scale. The difference between intervals is always measured from a 0 point. So, it has absolute 0, has additivity, and multiplicativity property. So, pareha sa length. Iputa na to 20 centimeters plus 20 centimeters equals 40 centimeters. Check. That's additivity. But when you say 40 centimeters is twice as long as 40 centimeters is twice as long as a 20 centimeters, check. That's multiplicativity. Okay? And it has absolute zero. So when you say zero, wala gyud ka exist. So muna siya ang ratio scale. Okay? So I hope na sabtan na ninyo. Okay? Nasabtan? Clear? Clear
Class.
na ba, class?
May I ask Chubby? Klaro ra ba to, Chub? Or kung dili, pwede na ninyo ko pangutan-an, i-explain ako balik sa inyo kung naglibog mo, kaya nakasabot ko sa gingo ni ma'am. Yes, ma'am, staff, you can continue, ma'am.
Okay. So let's continue. So collecting data using attitudinal scale. So kamay lang gid ako mag-share diri kay dili man kayo me used to using this type of in our research. So as statistician magod, we ang usually research is more on the methods. So example, sa dihan na mo ang mean. What are the processes of mean? How to use the mean? What are the advantages and disadvantages? Maray nga na ang among process. So we are not used to attitudinal. So I think Ma'am Kulin can actually share a lot. Okay, so kamay lang ako share. So there are a number of differences in the way attitudes are measured in quantitative and qualitative research. So in quantitative research, you are able to explore, measure, determine the intensity, and combine attitudes to different aspects of an issue to arrive at one indicator that is reflective of the overall attitude. Whereas in the qualitative research, you can only explore the spread of attitudes and establish the types of attitudes prevalent. So in quantitative research, you can ascertain the types of attitudes people have in a community. How many people have a particular attitude and what the intensity is of those attitudes. So usually in quantitative research, manggod, pag-abot sa attitudinal scale, so usually ginagamitan naman ko nato o Likert scale, di ba? Usually kanang do you agree, di ba? Ana man na siya or how far mga nga na, di ba? So nakita very fixed ang ato ang pag-measure usually sa mga attitudinal scales sa ato using quantitative research. But in qualitative research usually so akong na-explain kanya involves in-depth yun nga pag-explore kung what happens, di ba? So in qualitative research dili ka kontento mangutana nga do you agree on the vaccination program, di ba? Dili ka kontento ana. Mo na siya sa quantitative kay you are going to check how far do you agree or strongly disagree sa vaccination program, example karon sa gakahitabo. Whereas sa pag-abot sa qualitative research in-depth good nga naman why, what are the certain reasons why, so ingana na siya very different yun na sila duha.
Okay, ma'am.
So, muna siya mo ended sa open-ended versus closed-ended question. So, open-ended meaning you are actually asking the persons to explain kung unsa pa iyahang mga gusto ipang-ingon sa imuha about a certain topic, or as a closed-ended, very fixed ang imong choices para sa para sa imuhang respondent. Kung unsa iyang gusto, iingon sa imo. So, very fixed lang iyang choices actually. Now, so moda siya ang mga types of attitudinal scale. So we have the Likert scale or the known as the summated rating scale. So muna siya usually ang ginagamit sa social sciences. And we also have the Thurstone scale. Usually this is actually an interval scale, pero usually ang kailangan kaani og mga judges ang imong kailangan nun to evaluate answers. And we also have the Gottman scale. Usually, dili ka na siya ginagamit. Okay? Ratio level naman ni siya. So, wala kayo siya gina-explain. Wala ka siya na-explain sa book. Okay. So, the differences between sampling in quantitative and qualitative research. Okay? So, in quantitative research, you attempt to select a sample in such a way that it is unbiased and represents the population from where it is selected. So, mo ang concern sa quantitative research. No, dapat naglilistahan, dayon. Usually, we use random sampling to select our samples based sa atong population. So, that is the concern of quantitative research. Okay? As much as possible, we try to avoid biases in selecting our respondents. Mo siya sa quantitative research. Whereas in qualitative research, so there are actually a number of considerations that will influence the selection of a sample, such as the ease in accessing the potential respondents. That's one. Your judgment that the person has extensive knowledge about an episode, an event, or a situation of interest to you. How typical the case is of a category of individuals, or simply that it is totally different from the others. So lahi, quantitative research tends tries to select the sample, or tries to select a sample in a random way, in an unbiased way. As much as possible, everyone in the population should have an equal chance of being selected. That is quantitative research. Whereas in qualitative research, usahay atong ginatanaw unsaon ka na nako nga masayo na ko ni ma-access nga person, or usahay based on your own judgment kani nga tawo akong interview on. Why? Because I know this person has a lot of knowledge about this certain topic. So, may ilahan na nato later unsa day ang mga klase-klase nga types of sampling method that we can actually use.
I think bitaw ang stuff, most of my students for their topic karon kay, or rather most of their topics are on qualitative research, pero okay gapon kana bitaw mangita sila o interview ma'am kay in relation sa unsa, what do you think is the best way to address poverty during the pandemic. So ang interview ana kay tao mangyud dili magid siya nga kanang pwede gyapon ang tibok kay naa gyapon ko. I mean, my thesis group, Chabelita, Christine, and Syra, they had the plan to do a survey gid sa mga poor areas karon, pero with the pandemic magud kay morally secondary data na lang from DSWD amo ang lantaw nga buhaton ma'am. Pero kung nga na bitaw ma'am isakto baya nga dapat random ang sample if mag-quantitative, pero kung qualitative mag-interview lang unta mi or ang researchers sila o kuan interview ra unta sila o kanang let's say ang DSWD unsay lantaw sa DSWD nga pwede buhaton nga kuan nga program para sa mga poor during the pandemic.
Yes. Actually I agree. Usually manggod in quantitative research, mostly ang ginabuhat manggod mo nang they try to be like so unbiased, because mostly kanang kakandak og quantitative research mo pa na sila ang usually mga tao nga naay mga sampling frame or mga list ba silang respondents. The problem magud sa qualitative research kay lisod kayo mangitag respondents. And usahay example for mga graduates sa social sciences bitaw sa ganinang course. Kana bitaw sa mga
sociology ma'am?
Sociology, yes. Sociology. Ilang kina-interview mga tribal groups. Lisod yes, kayo mangita og listahan anak nila, and then sampling method baka mag-random sampling baka. So muna siya actually, so muna siyang lahi-lahi ko na ang aspect. Dili pwede nga atong i-force sa tanang panahon nga random sampling. Yes, kay namo ko times nga kanang example lagi ka ng mga tribal groups mo agto pagukag bukid ana daghan pa kay ng mga before ba ka mo agto sa isa ka tribe daghan pa kayo og mga agian ni mga process manangit pa ka dayon magdala pa ka di ba daghan kay process anang agian di ba. So muna siya ang anyway mabala na to later sa mga klase-klase nga types of sampling method that you can actually use. So determination of sample size between quantitative and qualitative. So the determination of sample size in quantitative and qualitative research is based upon the two different philosophies. Okay. In quantitative research, you are guided by a predetermined sample size. So meaning predetermined, meaning calculate na kasi mong sample size. Nga naman, because you actually have a list of respondents available. Diba? Example, kami sa una as statistics graduate, of course, kami mo agian yun mo like ang amuang mo ganit baby thesis. So, as statistics graduate, like kayo no nga, muna ba, statistics graduate ka, hindi ka kabalo mag-random sampling. So, actually, ang amuang baby thesis anto sa mua is, we actually studied the relationship between study hours and the grades of the student assistants in MSUIIT. So, nakakuha yung may listahan. And of course, kay statistics graduate ko no. So, mag-random sampling with me. Hala, we use Loven's formula to compute our sample size.
Yes, ma'am.
Then mo na siya pinakasikat actually. Kay dili mo
Ano
kay siya daghan of requirements sa iyang formula. You only need the population size and your margin of error. So, sayon tayo. And also we do of course random sampling fishbowl. So si Kuan kabalo man nalibot yun na mo ang pinakasuok sa IT. Asa man didapit sir, musakap ka, then muliko ka sa right, then nalapoy gamay hagdanan, then adin gamay nga portahan mo, dara na siya. O diba? So nga na yun ang quantitative, so magpinangita ay yun kinsa ni sila.
Yes,
so na siya. That's the reality of quantitative research. So that is based upon a number of other considerations in addition to the resources available. However, in qualitative research, you do not have a predetermined sample size. Wala kayo predetermined sample size because the frame is very hard to attain. The list of respondents is very much hard to attain. Okay? So, but during the data collection phase, you wait to reach a point of data saturation. So, when you are not getting new information or it is negligible, it is assumed you have reached a data saturation point and you stop collecting additional information. So, that's the difference between a qualitative research. So, kung wala na kayo enough, so enough na mo information yan, nag-interview pa kaglayan niya, maura man din hapon na yung info that I think enough na, that's saturated already. Okay, yes. Enough na. Okay, so muna siya sa qualitative research. So, the concept of sampling, so to collect from the whole or to collect from a few. So, sampling, therefore, is the process of selecting a few, a sample from a bigger group. So, the sampling population. So, to become the basis for estimating or predicting the prevalence of a known piece of information, situation, or outcome regarding the bigger group. Now, ano kailangan man ta mag-sampling? Pwede man ta makakollect of information from the whole population. Why? Because there are a lot of considerations. Number one, what if the population is very, very large? Let's take this one as a consideration. Whole, let's say
Ginoo ko ayaw.
Diba? So, dili lalim. That is why we resort to sampling or we reduce or we determine our scope and delimitation properly. Nga naman, to lessen our target population. Kaya dili lalim magkuha ka information from the whole population. Time constraint pag yun ta. Cost. So, muna siya mga reasons why we do sampling. So, a sample is a subgroup of the population you are interested in. So, you have to define, kinsa man akong gusto dito sa dihan. IS group ba? IT? Agtuba sa CAS ba ko? Or agtuba ko o mga medtech students? You have to define properly your target population so that you can select your sample based on your target population. So, the class, families living in the city or electorate from which you select your sample are called the population or study population and usually denoted by big N, big letter N. Basta population as big letter N, your sample is usually denoted by small n. So the small group of students, families, or electors from whom you collect the required information to estimate the average age of the class, average income, or the election outcome is called the sample. So, muna siya, ang sample size ninyo is usually denoted by n, small n. So, the way you select students, families, or electors is called the sampling design or sampling strategy, which will be discussed later. So, each student, family, or elector that becomes the basis for selecting your sample is called the sampling unit or sampling element. So, muna ni siya akong i-discuss ganiha kato yung sampling frame. This is the list identifying each student, family, or elector in the study population. So if all elements in a sampling population cannot be individually identified, you cannot have a sampling frame for that study population. So you can only call it a frame when it is already a complete list. Okay, so before you actually conduct a quantitative research, you must have or before you can actually start selecting your sample, you must have a sampling frame. especially in quantitative research. So, find your findings based on the information obtained from your respondents, or basically your sample, are called sample statistics. So your sample statistics become the basis of estimating the prevalence of the above characteristics in the study population. Okay. So muna ni siya yung ang population parameters. So they are the estimates arrived at from sample statistics are called population parameters or population means. So dili na kahit naman discuss ano. Okay. So let's proceed sa principle sa sampling. Number one, very important good sa sampling is randomization. So randomization meaning dili pwede mo nang ang one way to do randomization pinakasayon is fishbowl method. Ano? Fishbowl. So mo nang kung example ka na sa lottery kanis, lottery draw, kung dili mo naman kailangan pa man itimbang ang mga bola. Eh kung na yung mga bola dito mas gaan-gaan kaysa uban, of course kato mo, di ba? Musaka. Di ba? I mean like, di ba? Hangin ra ba ang mga na ato? Na kung ang bugat, of course, nara dito sa ubos. Pagka bugato sa hangin, so wala randomization na itabo nga naman. Dili mas equal weights.
Okay, ma'am.
Di ba? I mean like, nakuha ninyo akong point. So kung mo involve ka randomization, everyone must have an equal weight. Everyone must have an equal chance. Kung kailangan ta mag-fishbowl method, so ituyupon yun siya. Diba, kabantay mo sa mga lottery, tuyupon yun kayo, ipakita yun sa mga tao, tuyup yung mga papel dito sa butanganan. Para wala yun tayo maingon nga, na naman na daan sa iyang kamot, diba, gipilit naman na ang papel nga, kanigin si kuan akong pilion, akong parente. So wala yun nga nakakahitabo. Even in lottery draw, ka na magabi, diba, I think mo pakita yun sa mga tao nga timbang yun nila tanan ang bola. Although bisag anak sila, pero ginatimbang yun na kahit para pag buga sa hangin, everyone has a chance. Tanan bola, makasaka yun. Diba? Mo-roll yun sila equally. Okay. So, principle number one, in the majority of cases of something, there will be a difference between the sample statistics and the true population mean, which is attributable to the selection of the units in the sample. So, sample statistics class, like the sample mean, always differs from the true population mean. So, example, true population mean is 5. So, example, si group A, ang na-collect ni group A, ang sample statistics niya is 4.6. Posible kung nagamit o randomization po si group B, lahi po ilang sample mean, ibutang na ito 4.2. Ano man, maglahi-lahi maganda sila. Pero namatay concept of accuracy and precision. So, the bigger the sample, the closer will it be to the true population mean. Accuracy, what is accuracy? Kung makakita mo o kanabit ang bullet, kanakita mo sana, dart, kung sabi accuracy, if ang bullseye is your true population mean, sample mean will just be around it. So, muna siya concept sa accuracy. Okay? So muna siya. Anyway, bahala maglahi-lahi ta as long as narata sa palibot sa true population mean. So that is, okay, that is sample statistics. Okay, so muna niya ang principle number 2, the greater the sample size, na-explain na rin ako, the more accurate the estimates of the true population mean. Munang, kung na yung mga tanah sa kuwaon sa sample size, na ako'y suggest, of course, you use Lorenz formula, kaya mo siya easiest nga way of determining your sample. But as the concept in statistics, precision versus accuracy, precise meaning the higher the number of samples, the closer your value will be to the true mean. The smaller your sample, posible nga layo siya sa inyong true mean. Pero napo tayo ginatawag na accuracy para sa kung gingon, kung ang bullseye nimo or ang true population mean mo isang bullseye sa dart, you will be sure that the sample mean will just be surrounding the true mean. Okay? So that's accuracy.
Ma'am, may you explain the mean, ma'am? Kay basig the mean is the value
average.
That the researcher is okay, sige.
Average. Itong
If we were
But
to apply that, ma'am, in a research study, ma'am, for example, if we are going to sample the population of poor or low-income families in Cagayan de Oro, ma'am, so some sample would be that there's a difference between the sample statistics and the true population mean. When we say that, ma'am, saan na to apply na siyang example, ma'am, ani nga principle, ma'am?
ang sa ganun, balikan ako.
Like ang research, ma'am, is trying to determine the number of poor people right now, or rather kanang bitong low income families kanang daghan ba poverty level basically, ma'am, sa CDO during the pandemic, ma'am, ning taas ba or ning ubos. So nga na ang study. So ang mean, ma'am, is I think ang mean the true population mean would be, for example, let's say that there are, not sure what the population is in CDO in terms of poverty, pero I think 30% of the population ang current nga poverty level, 30 or 20% ana lang nga range ang poverty level sa CDO. So 20 to 30% of the population is poor. So out of that 20 to 30%, kay kuan siya kanang supposing gisample lugar na siya nga population. Di ko sure man saan na siya, basta ang ako lang pagkuan, ma'am, pagsabot, ma'am, kay accuracy and precision, the bigger the sample, the more precise the data. So kung ang estudyante kay kung mag-adto sila dito or mag-survey ang students dito sa community, kay pila ka buok ka poor people ang ilahang i-survey. So the bigger, the more people nga ma-survey, the more precise ang ato ang data. Basically mo na idea, di ba, ma'am?
Yes.
When we say population mean, it just means the poor, low income, the number of households, di ba, ma'am? Population mean the average number of low income households. Ana siya, ma'am.
Yes.
Sige,
Ang
ma'am.
population mean mo is ang tanan. Example ko
Tanan.
yes.
All
So
the poor.
example na 20,000 ka families na very low income sila. So 20,000 ka income ang imuhang i-collect, i-divide og 20,000. So that's population mean.
Yes.
Basically. Pero kung may example, of course, partra, bitaw na to 5,000.
Yes, ma'am.
Pero kung example group A will collect 5,000 ka incomes versus ang group B mo collect og 10,000 ka number of incomes. We will be sure that the group B mas close siya og value sa true
poverty level, ma'am, or something.
True income sa poverty level.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, mas daghan mo siya gi-collect. So nga na ihang idealism. Okay? Okay. So
dagan sila i-survey. If ever.
Muna siyang define properly your target population. So as much as possible, reduce. Okay, kaya sa una nga na, gusto gina mag-study o kuan sa Region 10. Are you sure Region 10? You can generalize what is happening in Region 10? Ay, girido sa nako mga Cagayan de Oro City na lang. Kung sure ka, Cagayan de Oro City. Later, sige, District 1 na lang yun, ma'am. So, okay. So, di ba? Like,
kanang lugar mga ma'am, stuff, like for example, kanang bitong mga United Nations level nga mga data, ma'am, I'm sure ang UN manggod, ma'am, kay ang ginakuha na nila ilang data from all the member countries muna kanang ma-determine nila ang statistic nga kahitabo kay tungod kay actually sa kung pagkaibalo, ma'am, ang research magud sa United Nations kay kanang ga-hire gid na sila researcher niya, gabutang gid na sila dagan kwarta kay para lang makakuha sila ana nga data nga specific niya, scientific pud kay na ilang pag-research sa data, ma'am. Pero like anang kung ingana bitaw kadako nga scope bitaw, ma'am, nga like pang international level na kay di ba ginakuha man gid nilang ilang information from like ang sa gagmay na per country. So like for example ang PSA, ma'am, or Philippine Statistics Authority, magkuha man sa gyapon nila ang dako nga data, pero ang kaning mga level nato nga nara ta sa university murag dili kay, ma'am, di ba, kay doon sa ako nag-survey sa PSA bitaw, ma'am.
So lahi gyud siya mo nang ingon ko define properly your target population. Kisa mo gid mo gusto studyhan kay at least kung define mo siya properly, dili na kayo ka maghipo kung asa ka mo asa mo sample. Kay kung makaya no, imagine kung may kang region 10 ya bito 1 million imong target population.
Sara isa, ma'am, sara isang research team kinsa may research team mo.
O
Dapat
lagi.
ay pakagdagan, di ba, ma'am? Daghan ba
Yes.
kagi mga tao para pa na.
So mo
Dapat
na siya ang kuan ba ang reality ba, ang reality bitaw. Of course, gusto magita part ani ka exposure magito sa research pero like at least ang reality ba, and not unless kung funded ka. Of course, kaya pwede mo
Ma'am,
ka
nakoy
hire.
question ma'am staff ba kana bitong ang si tawag ana kana bitong realistically speaking ang paggamit og Google Form karon ma'am, is it like is it like kanang valid ba siya or reliable ba siya nga paagi para mag-research? I think yes man ma'am kay daghan man mga research institute bitaw karon nag-hold og mga training on online research especially sa pandemic na gina-encourage man nila nga kung mag-survey lagi daw kay kana lang sa Google Form, yeah, valid lagi kuno compared sa paper nga survey form. So what do you think about that, Ma'am Steph?
It's up to you. It's up, pero
Depende
karon
na
magka pandemic,
Yes,
actually
sir.
ang kuan mo na gani mo nang sa research gyud sa mo sa una na gyud may kana pa ko kadungog pilot testing actually. Pre-testing actually ang term na mo sa una. Ano man ang say purpose sa pre-testing?
Yes,
Ang
ma'am.
purpose sa pre-testing is actually to evaluate whether ikaw, di ba, usay kay mag self-made questionnaires magugta. Dili ta mo adapt pa. So kung mag self-made questionnaire ta, ang problema usay sa self-made questionnaire kung nagkasinabtanay ba mo sa imong respondent.
Yes, ma'am.
Example, kasabot ang imuha bang idea sa imong question, nasabtan ba sa imong respondent?
Yes,
Kaya
ma'am.
namo mga questions usahay nga very vague, say vague ba the term? Anang do you have a car?
Yes, ma'am.
Kana nga question, do you have a car? Kana lang nga question kay, ha? Ako na ba kung sakyanan? Ako or sa akong pamilya? Or sa akong ana ba?
True, true. True.
So muna siya nga natin ginatawag nga pre-testing ang sa questionnaire kay dara makit-an kung nakasabot pag yun ang imuhang respondent sa imuhang questionnaire.
Yes, ma'am.
Then if that's the case, kung okay na to, ano na dayon ka magkuan, mag-continue dayon na dayon.
Ayan ani mo gamiton gyud ang questionnaire sa tanan
yes.
gyud.
Kaya whether Google Form siya or face-to-face, wala man tingali problema. Kay example, karon wala man tay choice sa ato ang choice sa
sa
type sa atong questionnaire nga atong gamiton kay wala man tay choice, Google Form ra gyud. Pero ang importante dara is actually ma-pretest na siya dapat kung kaya ba sabton sa imong respondent ang imong idea sa questionnaire. So I think mo na akong idea.
Pila po dapat ang katao ang mag-answer sa pretest nga questionnaire para ko na isa lang ma'am or isa ra katao
based sa imong target population depende sa imong research of course. If you do qualitative, I think pwede ra 1, 2.
Ay, sige.
O di ba kay pretest naman siya pero kung mag-quantitative ka dako man tingali og requirement.
Okay, ma'am.
Kay Google Form ra ba? Pero kung Google Form, pwede po nga i-answer po like ikaw, kamunduha sa imuhang pwede mo try og answer kung
sige.
Kasabot ba ka unsa ba ni siya nga klase nga question kay basin di lahi og idea ang imuhang ang researcher sa respondent mura man actually ang gina-avoid sa pre-testing. As to the number dili kay ko katubag. Pero kung qualitative versus quantitative magutog ngayon tag qualitative lisod ra ba mangita og respondent for qualitative okay, especially sa qualitative nga mangita gyud ta og usahay mga experts mangita gyud ta usahay og kanang nagi knowledge about sa certain topic ba kay usahay sa qualitative research enough na nasa tuwa usahay lima ka respondent isa ka focus group di ba pero sa quantitative lahi biya sa quantitative kay daghan ba usually ang involved. So muna siya problem dara. So as to the number dili ko ka sure. Namay mga comments sa internet pwede na ninyo i-research. Pero ako is idea lang kung like mga level, mga difficulties na pwede ninyo ma-involve, makita later ba. By the way, Saira Yakaw, nag-raise ka hand. Saira? Yes?
Yes, ma'am. Kanang madunggan ko, ma'am. Kanang abot sa amo di ba? Amo ma'am is about poverty. Ang among tangkuan ana is kung ay di ba impact sa low income family. Ang among ta is kanang unsa ba nabo sila kuan sila sa food insecurity or retrench ba ang mga tao during sa COVID, ma'am. Unta na amo kuan sa amo kung mag-survey manggaling.
Pero ako is namo ko toy kalimot og isa kay mo. One of the best type of research is actually a combination of qualitative and quantitative. Nga naman sa quantitative, ma-quantify nimo ang unsa ka kahitabo sa isa ka community, example yung mga low income, di ba? O unsa ka kahitabo, example karon sa pandemic. So you can quantify, then you can actually do in-depth na dayon using FGD. That's the best. Actually, for me lang ha, ako mo ingon, mas gwapo yun ang combine. Dili ko maingon, night times nga, of course, pwede ta mo focus na mag-FGD rata, kung lisod yun kayo mangitag mga research respondents. Kung daghan po kayo kag respondents, you can do quantitative. Pero the best build is actually a combination sa two. Pwede nimo siya i-combine, especially for social sciences, sa nga research. Yes. We're talking about social sciences. Okay, lahi ba sa ibutan na to sa biology, dili man ako pwede ma-apply ang idea dito diri kay sa biology may nga nagyud ko nga example mice, dili man ta pwede mag-randomization of mice, white mice, di ba? Maghimukuha ta sila mga dugo, magkuha na importante nga nalay consistency, naalay control, naalay nga naman experiment nila ha. So sa inyo ha, as social sciences, the best yun ang combination of the two. You should have at least quantitative dayon, supported dayon siya using qualitative nga data. Example, have you been kanang, or is there a displacement, anad ba yes or no man na siya nga question. So you can do chart, pie chart, ibutan na to. Excuse me. Pie chart. And then, sa kuan, supported pag yun na siya, kay mag-FGD pa man kaana. Ano man, what happened? O, di ba? May ka-in-depth yun ka based on the statement. May nga na ba? So, for social sciences, I would suggest yun a combination. Ako alam. Wala ko na.
Okay, ma'am.
Nanako na pinagtunan. Kaya kumangkulit. Okay, another. Sa pa yung mga question? Sige, pangutana mo.
Okay ra, ma'am. Pwede may makabalo sa Slovens formula, ma'am. Pero unya na lang, ma'am, pag mahuman na ka, ma'am.
Sige. Ambot na, involve pa na ako ang Slovens. Kaya murag, utok pa ko sa kuan. Pero pwede na ako i-send. I-send na ako. I-attach na ako. Wait sa kay. Wait na ako. Word. Like, wait lang mo ha. Ako i-attach na ng Slovens.
Joke kinang Slovens ato na ako sa grad school, ma'am, kasi Dr. Agas, ma'am, kailan ka ni Dr. Agas sa Xavier, ma'am, sa research.
Wala.
Iya kong ikasabaan, ma'am, kay sayop lagi daw ako ang pag-compute sa akong sample. Ang ending bito, ma'am, isakto ra gid akong sample actually. Wala bito iya kung ikasabaan gipatawag pa ko niya dito sa opisina kay sayop lagi akong Slovens formula. Nakabalog ka, ma'am, yun sa nagtuon og Slovens, ma'am, nag-Google lagi ko, ma'am, sa tuon og Slovens niya. Sakto ra man day gyapon at the end ang akong sample size.
Very simple ra man kayo ang Slovens. Sige, questions for a while. Yung mga pangutana nato. Questions from other group. Basta ha, for social sciences mo, ginag-isa gito. Na nakasuggest na kuan na nakadimot na gugisa gito. Pero one of the best good, especially for social sciences, mix good siya. You can quantify at the same time. Pwede pa yun mo ma-in-depth, pag yun ang imong explanation. Kaya mag-FGD mag-hook after. So, it's up to you. Ano kung hilabot
May I ask the other students, nobody is planning, aside from the poverty and the OFW group, nobody else is planning to do a survey, right? Or mag-survey pa bagyapon. I think initially, ang group nilang Janine, kaya naaman to'y plan, pero sa Liceo raman to nga topic, atong first na topic ninyo, guys, so di ko sure. Naabay plan ang group ninyo, Janine, na mag-survey? Dili naman, di ba, kay mag-apply raman mo kuan, tawag ani, mag-apply raman og IR theory sa isa ka game, right? I think so. So kana lang, ad-lib lang to siya. And I think as
na ko'y kuan nga question.
sige, Syra, go.
Kanang kung di ba anak man ka ma'am nga mag-compare mi og kanang laing country which is diri sa Philippines og lahi nga
Indonesia.
country. Unsaon man na namo pagkuan sa among data ana?
Mm. So ang may tabo man ana Saira, I think I recommended the group to ask an expert to do the comparison, like an interview with an expert on on poverty, for example, because we will base the analysis, like in the analysis of data, we will try to analyze the data on our level, as well as ask an expert to analyze the difference between Indonesia and the Philippines in terms of poverty. That's my recommendation lang, Kyra.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
The questions from the others. Nag-save ako sa kuan ha, kapit na. Okay na i-attach it, Ma'am Colleen. Kapira. Nagtunan kayo, Ma'am, no? Ako lang siya gikuan, material. Ikaw na lang mag-edit mga
Yes, ma'am.
telegrams. Okay, so save draft na ako siya, Ma'am Colleen.
Ako, ma'am. Anara, ma'am. Ako ako na i-post, ma'am. So,
Okay.
yes, ma'am. You can continue, ma'am.
Okay, so wala na questions na rin ng part. Let's continue. So, there are actually factors affecting the inferences, meaning to generalizing the population. So, drawn from a sample. So, the size of the sample. Okay, so muna siya. So, the extent of variation in the sampling population. So, in technical terms, the greater the standard deviation, the higher the standard error for a given sample in your estimates. So, muna siya mga factors kay, of course, kung naka-target population niya, dako kayo siya. So, kung gamay ra kag sample size, ang cost, ang time, so mga factors din na siya, mga maka-affect sa pag-infer nimo. So, ingon pa diri, if a population is homogeneous, meaning uniform or similar, with respect to the characteristic under study, a small sample can provide a reasonably good estimate. But if it is heterogeneous, it's a problem. Okay? Most of our target population is heterogeneous. So, or dissimilar or diversified, you need to select a larger sample to obtain the same level of accuracy.
Okay, ma'am.
So, aims in selecting a sample. So, when you select a sample in quantitative studies, you are primarily aiming to achieve maximum precision in your estimates within a given sample size and avoid bias in the selection of your sample. So, that is your aim in selecting your sample. So, bias in the selection of a sample can occur if, so naagi mga biases, if sampling is done by a non-random method. So, sikuan lang kay silingan, sikuan lang kay classmate, sikuan lang kay best friend. So, that is if the selection is consciously or unconsciously influenced by human choice. So, that's biases. Pero, kami siya nga bias is, dili man nato siya makontrol when you are using qualitative, especially when the respondents are very hard to attain. Ano siya. Pero, for quantitative research, muna siya mahitabo usually. Next is the sampling frame, so list, index, or other population records, which serves as the basis of selection, does not cover the sampling population accurately and completely. So, muna siya biases. So, example, Barangay Carmen, ang nasa sampling frame kay 80% ra. So, biases gihapon na siya. So, a section of a sampling population is impossible to find or refuse to cooperate. So, muna siya, bias gapon na siya. So, now, let us proceed now sa, na naman mo is Sloven's formula. No, na napoy sample dito. So now let's proceed sa types of probability sampling. So there are 4 types of probability sampling which are usually used in quantitative research, usually used. So the simple random sampling, stratified sampling, cluster sampling, and systematic sampling. Whereas usually in qualitative research, mo ni siya usually ang ginagamit ang non-probability. So the convenience which is least desired yun na siya. Convenience at the comfort of my home, sitting, and si friend lang, si best friend lang, that's convenience. Quota, snowballing, and purposive. Okay. So let's start with simple random sampling. So applicable when population is small, homogeneous, and readily available. So naay kaning mga quantitative probability sampling na sila advantages and disadvantages, and usually naapod ni sila panahon kung kanus-a sila ang ayan gamiton. So kung gamay ra imong kuan sampling frame, you can use simple random sampling. Okay? All subsets of the frame are given an equal probability, so each element of the frame thus has an equal probability of selection. A table of random number or lottery system is used to determine which units are to be selected. Okay, so mo ni siya. Ang fishbowl method, lottery method, table of random numbers. These are actually mo ni siya ginagamit sa SRS or simple random sampling. So what are the advantages? Easy method to use, no need of prior information of population. Equal and independent chance of selection to every element. Okay. So disadvantages niya is if sampling frame is large, this method is impracticable. Kung tako kayo imuhang target population, ayaw gid pag SRS. Imagine, Barangay Carmen, mangita kasi kung ano sa Barangay 2, Zone 6, anak yun dito. So, kung kinsa yun nakasulat yun sa imuhang pagbunot ni mo, kung kinsa nakasulat dito, maog yun dapat ito imong panitaon, ingana ba yun ang SRS. So, muna matingala ko sa mga students na anong mangutana ko sa kanang maog to sa kuha pa magkatawang silang research. Ma'am, unsa yung gigamit, mangutana ko, unsa yung gigamit na sampling method? So, ma'am, may random sampling. Unsa yung random sampling? Kuan lang ma'am, na tumik ko added. Ang kanang ma'am, katag lang tayo ni. So that's not random sampling. Okay, that's not the concept of random sampling. Random sampling means nakalistahan, nga na simple lang. Nakalistahan, naggamit ka og sample size determination, example Slovenes pinakasayon. Kung unsay gi-declare sa Slovenes, example 100 60 lang yung imong kwaon based on your margin of error nga allowable nga gi-declare. So sa 60 imo gyud gibunot, oy si kuan. So pangitaon gyud nimo ana bunot, that is randomization. So kung ingon na kanani adto kag market then naghatag-hatag ng questionnaire di adto, that's not random. Okay, kung daytime kung morning part ra ka, afternoon di na mga tao wala nimo gi-consider. Dayon, wala pa yung kay list. So that is not random. Okay? Dili na siya ma-declare. Basin quota ra ka. Quota something na siya. So does not represent proportionate representation. So, dili siya usahay magod basin sa imo, although ga fishbowl method ka, pero kadaghanan sa imo nangakuha kay puro babae. Or kasagara sa imo nakuha kay puro blood type O. So, mo po na yung problema sa simple random sampling. Okay? Now, let's proceed to stratified. So, actually, pinaka-ideal yun sa tanan ang stratified sampling. Okay? Pinaka-ideal yun siya. So, the population is divided into 2 or more groups called strata. So, according to some criterion. So, depende sa imong criterion ng ibutang sa imong target population. Be it income, okay, divide mo sila above average income, average o low income. So, depende sa imong gusto. Depende na siya sa category na imong pagkuan. Or male, female, or blood typing, according to blood type. So, dapat, again, kung magamit yung stratified sampling, naagihapon kay sampling frame or your list. Then, group them according to the category nga gusto nimo sila i-group o depende sa imong topics sa imong research. So either grade level, age, income, and subsamples are randomly selected from each strata. So, inganin ni siya, sa stratified sampling, ibuta na to, i-group na to sila kay pinaka, mo social science man mo, so ibuta na to by income. So, above average, average, or low income, i-group na nimo imong mga respondents. Then, you use proportionate sampling. Nadayon, mag-proportionate sampling ka. So, you can have fixed nga example, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 para ma-hold siya. Or, pero actually, mo-compute sa kasi mong sample size. Compute sa kasi mong sample size. Then, mo-compute sa kasi mong sample size. From there, mag-proportionate allocation na dayon ka. Pero, taas na kasi actually nga discussion basta. Basta proportionate allocation ka, then from there, ang ayos man sa stratified sampling ay well represented imong population. So even if gamay ra kaayo ang sulod-an nga strata, pero makuhaan gyapon na siya representative. That's the beauty of stratified sampling. Ang problema sa simple random sampling kay kung example, ang above average nga income is only 3, tulo ra sila ka buo. Ang average 5, ang below average na ay 10. So, posible, katong above average, dili to sila makuha ng representative when you use simple random sampling. Kaya fishbowl method, rabaya ka. Pero na stratified sampling, each of these groups must have a representative. That's the beauty of stratified sampling. So, ang strata is actually a grouping of homogeneous group. You are actually regrouping your heterogeneous group into homogeneous group. What about concepts of fruit salad pa mga? Fruit salad, daghan na siya, example na ibutan na to ang fruit cocktail, daghan na siya klase-klase nga fruits. So, ang gibuhat nimo sa strata, gilay-lahi sa nimo ang fruits. I-separate nimo sila according to fruit. So, karon pwede na dahil ka mukuha. So, muna siya ang concept sa imong sample. Your sample is well represented using stratified sampling. Okay. So, what are the advantages? So, enhancement of representativeness to each sample, higher statistical efficiency, and easy to carry out. So, disadvantage is na kay usay classification error. Muna siya, kay mo mas silang i-classify according to by category, time consuming and expensive. That's part of stratified sampling. Prior knowledge of composition and of distribution of population. So, ano siya problema usay sa stratified sampling. Ma'am, can we continue pa? Okay pa?
10 minutes lang, ma'am.
Sige. Mapit naman tingali niya anyway. Okay, cluster sampling. So, is an example of two-stage sampling. So, first stage, a sample of area is chosen. Second stage, a sample of respondents within those areas is selected. So, population divided into clusters of homogeneous units and usually based on geographical contiguity. Ngano kano sa matama cluster sampling when you have a very, very large population. So example, Cagayan de Oro City mong target population, you subdivide it by barangay. And then, from those barangays, you select na lang dayon using simple random sampling kinsa imong barangay nga i-interview. So example, if you choose Barangay Kauswagan, so everybody in the Barangay Kauswagan must be interviewed. That's cluster sampling. Okay, so muna siya concept sa cluster sampling. It is usually used when the target population is very, very large. Okay, so ingani siya upuan. Ingani siya. Kani siya nga case is actually muna na siya ang ginatawag nato of two-stage, meaning first selection of the section and then selection within the section. Example, diare, muna na siya two-stage cluster. Kung ang sa first stage, ang selection of section, so ang napili is section 1 and section 3. Ang second stage is actually selection of the within the section. So mo to na napili muna siya ang mga households na napilian. So that is cluster sampling, two-stage cluster sampling. So advantages, cuts down on the cost of preparing a sampling frame. So this can reduce travel and other administrative costs. Na naman, maka-reduce yung travel. If you are within barangay Kauswagan na, so reduce imong travel. Di na ka kailangan mo pag barangay Carmen, mo pag Lumbia, mo pag dili na. Because you are only within one barangay. Disadvantages is sampling error is higher for a simple random sample of same size. Often used to evaluate vaccination coverage in EPI. So, muna siya. Hindi na ko yung na-discuss. So, simple. Difference between a strata and a cluster. A strata is a subgroup of homogeneous groups, whereas cluster is heterogeneous na group. Okay? You are assuming that barangay Kauswagan will represent already the whole of Cagayan de Oro City, or the concept of Cagayan de Oro City. That's a cluster sampling. Okay, systematic sampling. So this is similar to simple random sampling. No table of random numbers. Select directly from sampling frame. So ratio between sample size and population size. So I cannot explain further kaya kulangan naman tag time, but usually in systematic sampling, the selection process is by jumps. So depende sa imuhang kuan. Ibutan na to, your population size is 12, your sample size is 4. Dayon, n divided by 12 divided by 4, that is equal to 3. Yes, Shana Sanchez.
Ma'am, i-clarify lang na ko ang katong sa cluster sampling because ma'am,
yes,
mention nga, for example, ang moang target is Cagayan de Oro and we're planning, for example, ang among pilion lang is barangay Kauswagan and barangay Lumbia.
No, dili ka mo mapili ha, dili ka mo mapili. The selection process is using simple random sampling gihapon kay probability sampling man na.
So dili mi kami
The selection process is dili ka mo mapili, dapat kana. Pero kung may example lang, ibutan nato mag-target mo o low income lang, ayaw pag-target mo Cagayan de Oro City. Specific lang mo, specific barangays. List the specific barangays dayon. Simple random sampling dayon mo.
Okay.
Bunuton gid siya, ma'am, no?
Yes. Even in stratified sampling, bunot yun na per strata. Probability sampling man isla, meaning everything involves probability.
Okay.
Walay self-selection dari. Okay?
Okay,
Sa
ma'am.
question, naparabay non-probability, ma'am. Sa manimo ang puli.
Sige, ma'am. Ay kaning pwede ra ta magpadayon ng staff sa recording. Ang uban students kinamangod sila class at 5:30. Okay, this lecture is recorded, so we can discuss what we need to discuss up to when we can finish. And then I think gamay na lang man sad ang nabilin nga discussion. And then for the students who need to go, you can go already, but I'll try to upload the lecture video so that you can just rewatch what you missed, okay? Sige, ma'am.
What if namoy mga questions, you can actually ipa-message lang sa akong messenger, ma'am. Stephanie Monte. Stephanie Monte pa ako ning sa messenger. Momong po na akong giingon sa last time katong sa biology ba, basin namoy mga questions, you can actually message me. Pwede rin ta magka-Google Meet kung free time na ako. I'll be available.
Salamat, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Kaya lisod ka. Okay, anyway. Okay. So, muna siya ang systematic sampling. So, sa systematic sampling, ang advantage of systematic sampling is unlike sa simple random sampling, usahay clustered magud ang mapili sa simple random sampling. But in systematic sampling, naamo siya jumps. So, example, your population size is 12, your sample size is computed sample size is 4. So, you divide population size by 4, you have 3. So I is equal to 3. Then you do simple random sampling from 1 to 3. So example, your first sample is 2. Using simple random sampling have between 1 to 3. So 2 plus 3 is 5. So your second sample is the 5th person in your sampling list or sampling frame. Plus 3, that's 8. So the 8th person plus 3. So that the 11th person. So that's the beauty of simple random systematic sampling. Spread out ang iyang sample. Dili ba mo medyo cluster? That's the problem with simple random sampling. Especially if there are actually least represented na mga individuals. For example, ang those persons with higher income, puta na tutulura sila. Yung average income kay 20 ka buo, ang low income 50 ka buo. So do not expect na you can actually select a respondent from those na nag-income o tagkaan, di ba? So muna siya use sa systematic sample. Spread out actually ang iyahang sample. So advantages, sample easy to select. Sample is very easy to select. So suitable sampling frame can be identified easily. So sample evenly spread over entire reference population. So muna akong gingon. So cost effective. Very much cost effective siya. Kasi disadvantage niya, sample may be biased if hidden periodicity in population coincides with that of selection. Ano man ang hidden periodicity? Ingani siya, example, I is equal to 3. Parihagan niya sa akong sample nga N is equal to 12. Ang problema, example kanang sa kanamit ang mga fruit trees, usahay kay kuan man nag-save as, what if every third tree is a mango tree? Dato pa, your sample might have all mango tree.
Yeah.
Unsaon na lang si durian tree, unsaon na lang si langka tree.
Yes, ma'am.
Muna siya ginatawag na hidden periodicity ba? What if every third person is a male person? What if every third person is a low-income person in your list? That's the problem with hidden periodicity. Kaya ang problema na, imuhang makuha nga sample, kaya homogeneous kayo, unsaon na lang tuguban nga, walay kuan. So, muna siya beauty sa strata or stratified sampling. Kaya mo man silang i-regroup into different levels. So, katong mga levels, bisan pa, duha na kabuok ang mga billionaires anto nga target population, makuhaan niya kung ito ni mong sample. Kaya tanan groups, kuhaan man mo sample. That's the beauty of strata or stratified sampling. So, among all these four, actually, ang pinaka-ideal beauty is ang stratified sampling. But there are times, especially when your sample is very small and it's quite homogeneous, you can do simple random sampling. When your sample target population is very, very large, so you can do cluster sampling. Kaya dili man po nato na maiwasan nga very, very large yun itong target population. So you do cluster sampling. But if wala po hidden periodicity ang imuhang kuan, you can do systematic sampling over simple random sampling. Okay, for a while lang, umubo lang ko, makulin, for a while lang, makulin lang. Ako doon na kadyot lang.
Okay, class, it's already time. So if you need to go to your classes, please take note lang nung our midterm exam was just posted in the classroom. Our midterm exam is going to be on March 18, 4 to 5:30 p.m. The coverage is also mentioned in the classroom and also the question types. I will try to post all of my lectures since katong research ethics board na tong lecture, i-post na ko to tanan lecture videos para ma-rewatch ninyo. Try lang na ako during the term week before sa Wednesday. Okay. Any questions, everybody, about also please be reminded of your deadlines now and kindly start writing your chapter 3 already. The deadline is on April 5, don't forget. And I'll return for my thesis group, ako lang po di uli ang inyong papers. Maybe tomorrow na busy ko pasensya sa delay. We'll just continue the lecture, and if you want to stay, you're very welcome. Yes, ma'am, staff.
Okay, so I think we are almost done. Kaya mo po na lang maning non-probability sampling.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, let's start with convenience sampling. Pinaka-least desired ni siya. Kay usually muna ni siya ang non-probability sampling mo ni siya usually ginagamit for qualitative research. Qualitative. Okay, kaya it doesn't involve any probability, it doesn't involve any sampling frame. So, example, convenience sampling. Mag-interview ka of preference Coke versus Pepsi o convenience sampling, di ba? Usahay atong gamiton or preference sa klase sa sabon. So, pwede ta magtawag lang sa itong mga respondents at the comfort of your home. Or, usahay, Kung mag-survey ta sa atong mga classmates, usahay atong gina-prefer is atong mga close friends. So that's convenient sampling. So it is actually the least desired sampling method among all the sampling methods. Okay? So quota. In quota sampling, the population is first segmented into mutually exclusive subgroups just as in stratified. So quota sampling is very much close to stratified sampling. Kaya maghimo makag subgroups ana. Pero ang selection process nimo within subgroups is not like stratified sampling nga mogamit pa kag simple random sampling. Sa quota, as long as ma-reach na nimo ang proportion of respondents within a certain subgroups, that's okay. It's up to you kung unsa nimo kuha ang responses. It could usually non-probability ang ginagamit ang pag-select sa imong respondents. So for example, an interviewer may be told to sample 200 females and 300 females between the age of 45 and 60. So it is this second step, which makes the technique one of non-probability sampling. In quota sampling, the selection of the sample is non-random. So, for example, interviewers might be tempted to interview those who look most helpful. The problem is that these samples may be biased because not everyone gets a chance of selection. This random element is its greatest weakness, and quota versus probability has been a matter of controversy over many years. So quota is closely related to stratified, but the selection process within subgroups is not probability sampling. Ang gamit. It's not SRS, it's not systematic sampling. So snowballing sampling. So from the concept of snowballing sampling, so gikan sa gamay, magkadaghan. This is actually otherwise known as network sampling. Ano man? Networking. Kaya saan ginagamit ang snowballing? When you are actually trying to sample from respondents or from persons or students na lisod pangitaon. Example, mga HIV victims. Hindi ba na sila exposed? Mga drug addicts. I'm sorry sa term, Ma'am Kath, Pauline, sorry, Pauline.
Okay lang.
Alagi, social science, magod mo. Listen mo kung mga mais na lugar, no? So,
sige, mag-mention na ako, HIV, gender, akong ginatudlo, ma'am. So, okay ra yan na.
So, may nga ang mga klase ng mga respondents, they are actually very, very hard to locate. Unang, dili sa tanan panahon nga, maingon siya ka, mag-simple random sampling, kanila, mag-cluster sampling. But in fact, lisod na sila pangitaon. Munang naate ginatawag as snowballing sampling. And this is actually otherwise known as network sampling. From one respondent or from one referral, mangayo na pagkag another referral, para ang imuhang snowball, kung i-roll na nimo siya paubos sa hill, magkadako siya. So your respondents, magkadaghan siya. So that's the basic concept of snowballing sampling. So there are actually 3 types of snowballing sampling. The first type is linear snowballing sampling. So it's a snowballing sampling in which the researcher recruits a single participant, while the second nominee recruits the third participant. The chain continues to refer linearly up to the end of the sampling. So, for example, one referral. So, kanisya, ang first referral, mangayo kag second, sa second, mangayo ka sa third, mangayo ka sa fourth. So, linear. So, in other words, kung mayroon ka linear, meaning, katong mga gipang-refer nimo, ning sugot yun to, na-interview yun to, nimo ka-linear man siya. Okay, so that's the first. The second, exponential non-discriminative snowball. So in this type, the first subject is recruited and then he or she provides multiple referrals. So each new referral then provides with more data for referral and so on until there is enough number of subjects for the sample. So example here, ingani. Non-discriminative siya, meaning katong yung pang-refer sa imuha, nakuhaan din mo siya kung responses. So kani siya, in this case, kung muna siya ang ginatawag na to, kung naapot ang saturation, kung sa pareho naman ko lang gipagingon. So, stop na. Diba? I mean, like, ano, sige pa magkag-interview para lang mo dako imong sample size. No need. If
Pwede ra ba
saturated
yung
na kayo,
Mm.
kung enough na, ayun na, pagpadayong ano man, wala na may new information na dungang sa imuhang kuan. Diba? Muna siya ginatawag na saturation. Yes.
If i-confirm lang niya ang iyang date, iyang sa hypothesis siguro ma'am, like if i-confirm lang niya, pero what if kailangan lang niya nga information is katulaging iya na kadaghan lugar ma'am Steph nga kuan ng sample like kanang poverty level sa population ma'am, kailangan gid niya i-collect to tanan. I-poverty level man yang gina-try og determine. Pero
Hindi, ma'am, i-determine lang niya, ma'am, kung kisa yung target population, ibuta na to dako kayo, at least na lang siya idea asa sila dapat kuha ng information.
Ay, sige. Okay.
This results to the next. Actually, ang next nga
Okay,
sa non-probability, basin mo ni siya pwede mo ninyo magamit. Kung maglisod good mo probability sampling, proceed to katong sa next. Okay. So, the third type is exponential discriminative snowball sampling. So in this technique, each subject gives multiple referrals. However, only one subject is recruited from each referral. So the choice of a new subject depends on the nature of the researcher. So nga ni siya. So, example, nag-refer og duha pero isa rin ning tunga. So katong sa aning tunga, dito na po ka mga referral. So muna siyang discriminative sa snowball sampling, exponential discriminative. Paspas ang growth, pero isara or duhara sa i-recruit ang tunga. Nag-iisa nga wala, or naiduha nga wala. Maragi nga na siya ba? Muna na term ng exponential. Remember, exponential, di ba, muraguan na siya kalit, minimudako siya ba? Muna concept sa exponential. Minimukalit siya dako. Pero na may discriminative, meaning na isa or duha sa di pang refer, wala ni tunga. Or wala ni mo nakuha information. So, muna ni siya purposive sampling. Kung maglisod yun mo quantitative nga kuan kung especially patuwit ang gingon ni Ma'am Colleen sa ito mga poverty.
Oh yes ma'am.
You resort to purposive sampling.
Sorry ma'am, sa to ma'am?
Purposive sampling.
Okay ma'am, sige.
So, ang sa purposive sampling man god katong purpose kung kinsa gyud imuhang purpose or kuan information.
Okay.
Kaya kung lisod naman po sampling frame, then mo nang giingon ako nga, kasi ga purposive sampling mo, wala mo ga random sampling.
Yeah.
So what is purposive sampling? So purposive sampling, also known as judgmental, selective, or subjective sampling. So based on like what, ang kani sila, kalisod yun ni kaning area. Subjects in this method are selected because of some characteristics. Muna ni siya. So some form of non-probability sampling in which researchers rely on their judgment when choosing members of the population to participate in their study. So when do researchers use purposive sampling? When they want to access a particular subject of people, as all participants of a study are selected because they fit a particular profile. Di ba? Unsa kung profile na gikinahanglan katong low poverty. So pwede siya. So advantages, purposive sampling enables researchers to squeeze a lot of information out of the data they have collected. Is a versatile research method that can be tailored to enhance a study's effectiveness. Sometimes purposive sampling may be the only appropriate method available if there are a limited number of primary data that can contribute to the study, and it is extremely time and cost effective when compared to other sampling methods. So, ang disadvantage niya is prone to researcher bias since researchers are making subjective or generalized assumptions when choosing participants. So, researchers need to assure that they are eliminating as much bias as possible, which consume a lot of time and effort when using another method or sampling procedure. So due to the fact that researchers are using their judgment to select participants and units of measurement, it can be a challenge to convince an audience that if different options were used, the overall findings would still hold true. Okay. So, nagkanta klase-klase nga purposive sampling. I think, mauna na siya ending. Okay. Kindly research na lang on the different types of purposive sampling. Sorry, wala din siya nasulod sa akong slides. There are actually 7 heterogeneous, homogeneous. Napo tayo ginatawag ng expert sampling. Ang expert sampling, kay katong mangutana lang yun ka sa some experts in the field. Example, mangutana ka farmers, mangutana ka o professors. So, muna siya ginatawag nga itong expert sampling. So, daghan kayo og klase-klase nga mga purposive sampling. So, kung if lisod yung kay buhaton ang simple random sampling, kay kailangan magitag sampling frame, you can do purposive sampling. Para sa katanggingan ni Mamang Kulin. So, muna identify properly kung kinsay mo mga target population para dito na lang ka magkuha og information sila. Okay?
So mura siya purposive, ma'am, if moadto sila sa isa ka area na dito ang population, then kaning mag-hold lang din sila og quota sampling, ma'am. Okay ra ba na siya, ma'am? Or mas maayo tong simple random sampling, magkuha gig listahan, ma'am.
Kung kaya nila magpag-listahan, mag-SRS sila, okay kayo yun. Pero kung mag-lisod sila sample time constraint, what if ang naa sa listahan tanan kay dili dito mo kulang pa dito sila, so dili gyapon siya maka-represent. So it's up to you, it's up to them. Kung kaya kayo sa time, go SRS.
Okay, ma'am.
Pero ang SRS kailangan yun siya complete list. Kung base ang naa sa listahan kay dili po tumuot tanan ang experience o katong poverty level, nasa poverty level, that's a problem.
Okay.
Kasi ang uban dito kay mga above average ang income, yun yung target kay katong mga low income and what happens to them during the pandemic. So, hindi kayo kuha niyo makatch niyo ang idea.
Wala. Sige, ma'am.
Okay.
So, depende sa purposive sampling, ma'am, depende gina sa researcher unsa ano pangita sa iyang sample, di ba, ma'am? Like kanang pwede
i-identify nimo unsay imong depende sa purposive sampling, you have to identify kung kinsay mo mga target ng mga sample.
For example, ma'am, kanang siya gibangitag poor people, di ba, ma'am? Poor people, low income household, sorry.
Okay, o ana, siya gyud mismo mangita. Pero muna mo define properly your target population, like define properly kung kinsa imo asa unsa nga target area ang imong gi-refer. Muna natin research local. Kaya dito nimo i-define nga dapat dali ra nga lugar. Dili nga lugar kay basin pag generalize nimo kayo sa tibuok Cagayan unya. Small area ra dito ang imong nakuha information. So bias kayo ang imong pag-infer.
Sige, ma'am.
Okay, question. Ang purposive sampling, ma'am, paano ba siya, ma'am, kanang ma-recommend din mo siya for us to use, like something in effective sad siya, ma'am, if kaniya mong
okay naman ang purposive sampling kay usually kung tan-awon bitan ako mga previous researchers, usually purposive sampling naman yun. Muna ningon ko nga, do not use the term random sampling kung wala yun din yung nabuhat ang random sampling. Like, wala yun mo nag-call listahan, wala yun mo nag-fishbowl method, gikan sa inyong listahan, o wala yun ninyo pangitaan o nakuha ninyo nga mga pangalan sa inyong nakuha nga pangalan gikan sa fishbowl method. Ayaw yun mo pagamit og SRS nga term sa inyong paper.
Kaning purposive sampling, ma'am, kuan siya, ma'am, interview ra ni siya, ma'am, or pwede mi survey?
Kuan ni siya, selection process pa man ni siya. Selection process ni siya kung unsay may yung pag-interview ni or kuan, it's up to you, qualitative versus quantitative na dayon na siya nga kuan. Pero kaning purposive is selection process sa mga respondents man siya.
Okay.
Ang pag-select sa mga respondents.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. So, any more?
Wala na, ma'am.
Okay, so I think that's all for my lecture. Kulin, hopefully na satisfy ra mo.
Yes, ma'am. In relation to the Sloven's formula, we will just use the Sloven's formula in determining the sample size. And as mentioned by Ma'am, staff, pwede may magpatudlo, ma'am? Like, para lang kuan sa Slovens, ma'am. Para lang sa nga makabalo sila sa compute. Kung ila na ibalik og tanaw, ma'am, sa ibalik og tanaw ning lecture video, ma'am. Kakita sila sa compute sa sample size, ma'am.
Na-post na nimo siya, ma'am?
Yes, ma'am. Na siya sa
lesson 7. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. And I have it opened here in my computer as well, ma'am.
Okay, so muna siya ang Sloven's formula. So, it's determining sample size ta is equal to big N, meaning your population size over 1 plus big N E square. Kanang margin of error, it's up to you to decide kung kailangan yung margin of error na i-declare. So, munang kailangan tag population size, munang mugamit tag Sloven's formula if nagyo tay population size or not tay frame. Okay? So, example lang sa imong sampling frame kay 100 kabok ang total population size. And you set your margin of error to 0.05. So, ibutan na nimo siya sa formula. So, 100 over 1 plus 100 times 0.05 square. So, ingani ni siya. Para mas dali. So, 0.05 times 0.05 is 0.0025. I-times nimo siya sa 100, that's 0.25. Then plus 1. So, that's 1.25 ang denominator. 100 divided by 1.25 equal to 80. In other words, you need 80 samples for your research na yun. Okay? So, any more? Basta na open more questions.
Wala na, ma'am. Katoro yun.
Okay. So, I think that's all.
Oh, yes.
Pagpuli na po na satisfied ako.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am Staff, before you go, ma'am, I'm going to present your certificate, ma'am Staff. I'll email the certificate, ma'am, but I'll read the citation, ma'am Staff. Certificate of recognition is presented to Mrs. Stephanie Monte Trangia for serving as a speaker during the conduct of the lecture on measurement scales and selecting a sample held for the junior research students in the IS program of Liceo de Cagayan University given this 11th day of March 2021 at Liceo de Cagayan University. Signed by myself. Thank you kay Ma'am Staff. Ako ni-email, Ma'am.
Okay. That's all. Thank you.
Yes, Ma'am
If
Staff.
nasa mga queries, please i-messenger lang sila sa kuha.
I-add po siya ka, ma'am.
Okay, one per group lang. One per group lang. Para dili kayo loaded. Okay. Patingala ko kasi pare-pareharan mga question niya. Same group lang sila. Isa lang taga-group, ma'am. Or leader per group lang. Ana lang. Ana lang.
Staff.
Okay.
Have a good day, Ma'am Staff.
Okay, goodbye, ma'am. Thank you. Bye-bye.